What's up, guys? This is a special NHL draft episode, an episode we thought would never be made. But unfortunately, because of Bob McKenzie and former scout of the Montreal Canadiens, Grant McCagg, it seems like the debate is heating up. You have Slafkovsky versus Wright for the first overall pick. Who will the Montreal Canadiens select with their first overall pick? And now, with a couple of days before the draft, it seems like people do not know who should go first. And today we're going to be giving our thoughts and putting to rest the debate once and for all. So,
Yeah.
Luca, let's get it started.
Well, I think we talked about the fact that both nobody really knows where this is going to go and who's going to go first overall. Well, obviously there's been a lot of debate on Twitter over the last, I would say week and a half, especially that about who the Montreal Canadiens are going to draft first overall. And I know that for the most part throughout the whole year, it was pretty clear cut, obvious, right? The Montreal Canadiens are going to draft Shane Wright. However, lately, and like you mentioned, it's been a little bit more uncertain, right? Bob McKenzie came out with his draft rankings, and when he came out with his draft rankings, it caused a lot of controversy. He had Juraj Slafkovsky at number one and stated that out of the 10 scouts that he had interviewed, he had seen that five of them chose Slafkovsky. Now, we don't know which scouts he interviewed. We don't know how close these teams are to drafting these types of players, but the facts speak for themselves. And what's interesting as well is he made his prediction based on what he felt and what he did by asking scouts. He didn't necessarily say the Canadiens were going to draft Slafkovsky. He didn't say the Canadiens weren't going to draft Slafkovsky, but he talked about how he impressed at the Olympics and the World Championships, and how because of that, scouts see him as more of an NHL ready player and someone who's more ready in the NHL compared to Shane Wright. To me, personally, and I've been an advocate of Shane Wright since the beginning. You can ask Christopher, you can ask Chris, who's currently not on the podcast today. I've been advocating for Shane Wright since the beginning of the season, and I'm going to stick to it. I think he's the best player in the draft. I think he's the one that the Canadiens should draft first overall. But like Chris mentioned, we're going to break down both players, and we're going to talk about why we feel the Canadiens should draft either Slafkovsky or Wright, and why we think that they should do that. But also, we want to know in the comments as well from you guys what you guys think as well. So, Chris, I think that the Habs should draft Shane Wright. We're going to go into our reasons after. Who do you think the Habs should draft?
Look, man. I know people are gonna say that Slavkovsky, he was able to compete against men. He was able to impress and win the MVP at the 2022 Olympics. But let's take into consideration that he did not face NHL caliber players. He faced washed up players or guys that have never been a part of the NHL before. And when you're 6 foot, and over 200 pounds.
He's 6'4", I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
6'4".
yeah, 6'4", over 200 pounds at the age of 17 years old. Yo, man, like, what do you expect? The kid's a monster already at that age. He's a physical player as well. He has what it takes. He has a fantastic shot as well. There's a lot of things about him that I like, and people are saying, well, if you already have Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield on that first line, what are you missing? You're missing a power forward. But wait, you have Josh Anderson. But there's rumors that Josh Anderson may get traded for a top 10 pick, which Scott Garrick of the Ottawa Sun reported that the Canadiens are looking to
Bruce
add a
Gary, not
second. Oh, yeah, Bruce Garrick, my bad. Was mentioned that the Canadiens are looking to add a second first round pick in the top 10 selection this year. So there's names like Christian Dvorak being thrown around, Jeff Petrie, Mike Hoffman, Josh Anderson. So they want to add a second round pick. And could it be possible that maybe they want to draft Shane Wright and Slavkovsky somehow? And because there's such a debate going on between these two players, do you go with the power forward, the left winger, or do you go with the center and you create a 1-2 punch with Nick Suzuki and Shane Wright, or do you get Slafkovsky to play on the top line to complete the first line with Slafkovsky, Suzuki and Caulfield. So
Well, well, I
it's very
think
interesting to see.
personally, look, I think for the Canadians, and people are talking about it, say, oh, Slavkovsky next to Wright and Caulfield, it makes a lot of sense. It does, and it definitely does make a lot of sense. But the Canadians for a long time have always lacked centers, right? It's always been about the Canadians not being able to get that true first line center. Now, I know that Bob McKenzie and I think a few other scouts stated that they see Shane Wright as a second line center. To me personally, when I look at Shane Wright, he reminds me a lot of what John Tavares was when he first got drafted by the Islanders. I'm not saying he's compared to he reminds me a lot of John Tavares. And John Tavares to me in his prime was a really good first line center for his team. And so I think that the Canadians here, they have a unique opportunity where they're drafting first overall. We've lacked center depths. And I know that Nick Suzuki, you can look at it, you can say, oh, he's your first line center. You're right, but it's never a bad thing to have more than one quality top center.
Well, if you
You
look
look
at
at
all these, sorry to cut you off, but
Stanley
if you
Cup
look at all
winners.
these
Yeah.
Stanley Cup winning teams, they have a 1-2 punch in terms of the center depth, right? Where both the first line center and second line center could easily be interchangeable, right? This year you have Nazem Kadri and Nathan McKinnon,
Yeah.
right, at center. So you have those two guys. In the past, you have Point and Sorelli. In the past, you have also had O'Reilly and who's the other guy? Shen.
Yes.
Then you have Backstrom and Kuznetsov, Crosby, Malkin, Carter and Kopitar at the time.
Well,
You know,
Washington had, yeah, Backstrom, because that's it. You mentioned that. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
that's it.
the list goes on and on. And if the Canadians want to be a playoff contender, or better yet, a Stanley Cup contender, they're going to have to get that center that's interchangeable, that competes every night against Nick Suzuki. And I think Shane Wright is that guy. But I do want to pull out some stats and some information that, Brian Wild made very clear in terms of this whole Slafkovsky versus Wright
Yeah.
debate. Um, so he was saying that Slavkovsky's a .33 per game player. Barkov is a .91 per game player. All others in La Liga, in the Finnish league, were .5 point per game players. So Slavkovsky has inferior numbers. So if you look at draft your first round picks from La Liga, you have Barkov, who had 48 points in 53 games. Capo 38 points in 45 games. Liney, 33 and 46. Then if you look at Rantanen, you have 28 and 56 games. Kokeniemi, 29 and 57 games. Teravainen, 21 points in 43 games. And then Slafkovsky, 10 points in 31 games. So he also says that, Wright is no McDavid, of course, but after missing a full season, he is a 1.63 point per game player from December, in which it's a best mix of the OHL and the WHL in a decade. So he made
Yeah.
that clear, and he said that Slavkovsky is nowhere near La Liga greats, Liga greats. Sorry, not La Liga. La Liga's it's a Spanish league in soccer.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
are the Montreal Canadiens really gonna make the Olympics and World Juniors their defying decisive moment in terms of who
Well,
they're gonna go first overall?
well,
So he says that time may prove me wrong, but as of right now, I'm gonna take the center with a big sample size of big success in terms of the comparison between Slavkovsky and Wright. So he says that Wright is the better pick.
yeah.
And then also Pierre LeBrun was stating that there are some that believe that Montreal's waiting to see if the Devils pick up the phone and see if they were willing to flip picks to ensure that they can take winger Juraj Slafkosky. So there might be a trade between Montreal and the New Jersey Devils. So this is why we're making this video, because there's so
Yeah.
much talk going on. Who is it going to be, Wright or Slafkosky?
Well, I think it's exactly what you were saying before. But you talk about the stats, and you mentioned the fact that I don't even think like LeBron said, the Canadians don't even know who they're going to take, and I think that that's interesting going in, like knowing that we're literally a week away from the draft. It becomes a really big talking point, and I think, look, you talk about Slavkovsky, you mentioned the fact that he's played against men, he's played in the Olympics and the World Championships. Nathan Gravite, who's a YouTuber, shout out to Gravite. He tweeted out something on June 28th saying that Juraj Slafkovsky's World Championship scoring, and he played against when he played against Denmark, Italy, Kazakhstan, and France. He played 4 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. Then when he played against Canada, Finland, Germany, and Switzerland, 4 games played, 1 goal, 0 assists. Right, and the Olympics were far more spread out. He had 6 goals against Sweden, Finland, and USA. The World Championship featured NHL players, and the Olympics did not. And then he also said Slafkovsky played against men in the World Championship and the Olympics and dominated. He did play against men, and he got ate up when those men were of NHL quality. Even those Olympic rosters weren't close to NHL caliber. And it's kind of what you mentioned before. I think we've got a situation here where there's too many scouts that are essentially looking at his Olympics and World Championships and saying, okay, we think that he's the best player in this draft. And I think a lot of people are debunking that, saying, okay, but wait, hold on a second. Look at the teams that he's gotten points against and look at the teams that he hasn't gotten points against, right? No disrespect to Italy and Kazakhstan and France, but these countries are not hockey countries, right? They're B-level countries compared to the big ones of the Swedens, the Switzerlands, the Finlands, the Canadas, right? So there's definitely a level of competition there that is telling, right? You look at Slafkovsky, obviously he's not playing against NHL caliber players when he's playing Italy, France, and Kazakhstan compared to when he's playing Sweden and Finland. So for me, I look at Shane Wright and I look at him as a player and all round, right? And now it's about comparing the two players. Well, Shane Wright was on a team that wasn't that great and struggled, but he was also on a line with 2 rookies that were just coming up for Kingston. And Luca Caputi, the coach of the Frontenac, said that he was very impressed with the way Wright handled himself, taking on the role of being the mentor for these young kids, and also taking into account that the reason he didn't get more points is because he was playing with younger guys and rookies and kind of mentoring them to try to get them accustomed to the junior level. So I really like that from a coach coming from Luca Caputi, especially because it shows the type of character that Shane Wright is, and it goes to show you that Montreal needs that type of player on their team, right? Shane Wright is a guy that was able to come in, still produce at a really good rate, despite playing with not even the most skilled guys on his team, right? And so we're talking about, oh, Wright didn't have a good year. Yeah, but there's context there, right? There's context in the reason why Slafkovsky's done well. And I think that we have to take that into account. And again, I'm not trying to say that Logan Cooley's a bad player. I'm not trying to say that Slafkovsky's a bad player. All I'm saying
We can all agree now that Logan Cooley has gone down
yeah,
to
of course,
third overall pick, and I think Arizona's going to get an absolute steal in Logan
of
Cooley.
course.
So good on them. There's also the biggest question here: can Slavkovsky's game in Europe translate to North American hockey? And this is a problem we've been seeing for many years now. Okay, where players did fantastic in Europe, but once they came to North America, they struggled immensely.
Well,
And a guy that we could all, talk about every day is, Nail Yakupov. That's a guy that, um, yes, we do know that he played in the OHL and stuff, but being a Russian-born player, you would think that he was so uh, good for Team Russia and the World Juniors that once he goes to North America, once he plays for the Edmonton Oilers, you would think that that success would translate as well. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and guys like Capo Caco is
yes,
another
Barry Cocconielli.
example. Jesperi Kokoniemi is another guy as well, and Slafkovsky, look, he's a possession monster. He has the body. He's the ideal power forward. Okay, he uses his body as as an advantage for him to move the puck up and down the ice. He's good defensively. Um, he takes advantage of the ice. But the thing is that the ice in Europe is different compared to North
Yeah,
America.
that's
So
it.
I mean, look, I think Wright has, what it takes in terms of leadership as well. I think he's very mature. He knows and he's humble as well, and he's very confident that he is the ideal first overall pick. So people that are looking at Slavkovsky's second end of his progression in terms of pre-draft, I
Yeah.
think everyone has it wrong. If you look at Shane Wright from the beginning till the end, okay, people have been saying he's the ideal first overall pick. Now all of a sudden Slavkovsky's pulling these wonders, but again
Well,
in Europe against teams that are not that great, and now people are freaking out saying
you
that
know,
Slavkovsky has to go first overall. And one thing I would also like to mention is that Grant McCagg also said that he sees Slavkovsky being a modern day Jeremy Jagger, which is possible, but then again, it's just such a small sample size.
well, I think this kind of reminds me of Jack Hughes and Capo Caco. That year too, it was all, oh, Jack Hughes is going number one, right? And then 2 weeks before the draft, it was like, wait, Caco might go number one finally. We decided and we realized we think Capo Caco is going to go first overall, and it's like it's this whole big situation of like, oh, let's just try to rile everybody up, right? And I'm not trying to say, look, don't get me wrong, it's entirely possible Montreal goes on that draft stage and goes, hey, you know what? We're taking Juraj Slafkovsky number one. It's entirely possible. But I just think it's another one of those situations where we're looking at it going, you know what? We've got two guys here. They're similar in talent. They've had two different paths to get to where they are. They're similar players in the sense that they don't really have, they're not really far apart. So let's try to see what could go on here. And if you interview certain scouts, they'll tell you one thing, and if you interview another pair of scouts, they'll tell you another thing. But to me, right, I think from the beginning it was always Shane Wright, and just like in the Jack Hughes draft, it was Jack Hughes at the
Yeah,
time too, and then
exactly.
that's what ended up happening. Hughes went first, Kako went second, and I have a feeling that's
And you look
exactly
at
what's going
Shane
to happen
Wright,
now.
he's ideally, in my eyes, he's an elite two-way center. He's being compared to guys like Patrice Bergeron. And people are going to be like, well, isn't Nick Suzuki a comparison to Patrice Bergeron? What's the problem with having two Patrice Bergerons on the
That's
team?
it.
Like, I just don't understand. He's also, like you said, comparable to John Tavares, so it all comes down to this. Slavkovsky is the power forward, has been compared to other greats like Jeremy Jagger, which I think that's really off, but he has been compared to that
I would
guy.
say Rantanen. If you have to compare him, you could compare him to
Yeah,
Rantanen.
there's also that. And then you have the elite two-way player in Shane Wright, the centerman, who's been compared to guys like John Tavares and Patrice Bergeron. Obviously, Tavares with the Maple Leafs hasn't, he hasn't had that same impact that he had with the Islanders. I think, because he's been relegated to the second line, so he has less minutes compared to what he was, putting up in New York on Long Island, because he's playing right behind Matthews. But you know that's the beauty of having a 1-2 punch. And I think that the answer is very clear. It's easy to acquire a winger, especially a power forward in the NHL. But when it comes to a centerman, and like Mark Bergevin has said in the past, it's very hard to acquire a top line or second line center, and you're going to have to give up a lot of assets. We're talking about 8 prospects, first round picks, NHL caliber players in the top 6. This is your opportunity. You're drafting first overall. Do not mess this up, Montreal.
Well, I
Shane Wright is the answer. It's been the answer from the beginning. It's the right choice.
I was just about to say I think Montreal is going to make the right choice at the NHL draft, but we'll see. We'll see.
We'll
Right?
see.
We're going to be at it. Me, Christopher, and Chris will all be
We'll
attending the
be at the
NHL draft.
draft in
So
Montreal.
stay tuned for that. We will be posting
Yeah.
videos and maybe going live as well.
Yeah. We'll see
For the
what
draft.
we're going to do in terms of that format. But guys, don't forget to comment who do you think is going to be the first overall pick,
Yeah.
Slavkovsky or Wright, and explain why your pick is going first overall. And should we even be having this debate? Write that in the comment section below. Like this video, share this to any Montreal Canadiens fan or anyone that's interested in the draft, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode, guys.